Still in Texas, Texas's state legislature has passed a sweeping election bill. It now heads to Governor Greg Abbott's desk to be signed into law. Opponents decry the bill as an attempt to suppress the votes of minorities who are more likely to vote for Democrats. But Republicans say it's needed to secure election integrity in the state, even though there's no proof of significant voter fraud during last year's presidential election. So covering this story for us is CBS political reporter Adam Brewster, and he joins me now to dig into this. Many people will recall, Adam, that this was the bill that led a number of Democrats, I think all the Democrats in the state legislature, to flee the state in order to delay the passing of the bill. Could you just break down some of the restrictions that this bill imposes on voting in Texas?
Right, this has been a months-long fight, stretching all the way back probably to when the bill was first introduced back in March. Of course, there was a walkout in May that ended the regular session in a previous election bill. Then there was when many Democrats, more than 50 Democrats, left the state capitol, most of them going to Washington, D.C. to sort of break quorum and stall this process for about 5 to 6 weeks. And then now this bill has finally passed and is on its way to Governor Abbott's desk. And it covers a lot of ground, Anne-Marie. It bans 24-hour and drive-through voting. Those are two things that were used by Harris County, which is home to Houston, during the pandemic. Civil rights groups have noted that both of those practices were used by a majority of minority voters during the pandemic. It also bans officials from sending unsolicited absentee ballot requests, the application form. Now, Texas does have very strict measures of who can vote by mail, so this is not an application that could go out to every voter anyways, because not every voter in Texas is eligible to vote by mail. It gives some powers to partisan poll watchers. It allows them to have some more freedom of movement, to make sure that they are able to stand close enough to see and hear what's going on with election administration officials. It makes it harder to remove them, or it makes it a crime if an election worker does not allow a poll watcher in who is required to be there. Now, there is a training now required for poll watchers. They also have to sign a document saying that they will not disturb the process of voting, but that has certainly been one of the contentious issues. There is also some expansion of early voting hours. They lowered the threshold for the amount of people who live in a county. It was previously 100,000. Once this bill is signed, it will go down to 55,000 who have to hold the maximum number of early voting hours. There's also some expanded hours on the final Sunday of early voting. So it really covers a lot of ground and sort of, makes a lot of changes to Texas's election laws. It also, on the mail voting issue, adds some ID requirements for people who are requesting to vote by mail and when they return their ballot.
So as you pointed out, Democrats tried to sort of run out the clock on this bill, not once but twice. The last time they fled the state, holding it up for a little over a month. But then that tactic kind of fell apart when some Democrats returned to the state. Do you know why they came back?
They said that it was time to bring the fight from the nation's capital to the House floor. They said that they felt that their work in Washington, this was the group who initially came back and reestablished a quorum. And once that group came back, we saw more Democrats join them for that fight on the House floor last week when there was a very lengthy debate over this bill. And they said it was time to take this fight to the House floor and to advocate for their constituents. Now, at the end of the day, Republicans have the upper hand in this fight. Governor Greg Abbott said that he was going to keep calling special sessions until an election bill was passed. The Lieutenant Governor, Dan Patrick, who is the president of the Senate, said in July, look, this bill is going to pass. Whether it's in October, whether it's next February, or whether it's next June, this bill will pass. So Democrats, if their strategy was to stay out of the state capitol, to stay out of Austin, that was something that was going to have to continue for a very, very, very long time. It also would have had an impact on redistricting. So from a practical standpoint, it was just a hard strategy to keep up. And lawmakers said that they felt that they had made some progress on the federal front, and it was time to bring that fight back to the House floor last week.
So the bill went through some changes after it passed the House. Republican senators wanted to remove an amendment that dealt with people who might accidentally illegally vote. What was that amendment all about, and why was it removed?
Right, so this was an amendment that the House added last Thursday that dealt with the issue of people who may have voted illegally but didn't know they were doing so. It stems from a case of a woman named Crystal Mason who was facing 5 years in prison for illegally casting a provisional ballot during the 2016 election. She was on supervised release, and that is, people who are on supervised release in Texas are not allowed to vote. And she has said, though, that she didn't realize that she wasn't able to vote, and this was just a provisional ballot that was cast. And so this is a measure that goes back into the spring, into the regular session. In this instance, it was proposed by a Republican member of the House side, and it's something that Democrats had pushed for to say, hey, we shouldn't be, punishing people with prison sentences who might vote illegally but didn't know that they were doing so. Now, once it passed the House, the House and the Senate had to get together to sort of hash out any differences that they didn't like. The Republican Senate sponsor of the bill said that he heard from some prosecutors and others who said adding this provision may make it harder to prosecute cases of illegal voting because you can't always prove someone's intent, whether they knew that they were actually doing something that they were not supposed to be doing. As Ms. Mason has said, this was an accident. I did not mean to do it. I would not have voted, had I not known. And so Democrats and even some Republicans who pushed for this said those are not the type of people we should be punishing with lengthy prison sentences, people who made an honest mistake when they cast a ballot if they were not supposed to.
Right. Makes sense. Adam, thank you so much.
Thanks, Anne-Marie.